to Dear Book Coach. I'm Stephanie Detlefs, writer and certified book coach.
I'm Terry Thayer, certified book coach, certified focusing professional, and author.
And I'm Carrie Savage, writer, project manager, and certified book coach.
And this is a friendly advice space for you as you plan, draft, and revise your novel. In each episode, we answer one question submitted by a writer like you with 3 different points of view, and you get to pick the advice that resonates with you. So today we have a question from Amanda. I'm almost to the midpoint of my book, and I'm really struggling to figure out what scene comes next. I have ideas and I've tried some things, but nothing has worked. Can you give me some practical strategies to try to help me get unstuck? Terry, what have you got?
I've got middles are hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, middles are really difficult. And this is where I think writers become authors, or writers stop working, because it's really difficult. And it's harder if you haven't figured out what your book is about. If you haven't thought the book all the way through, which in itself is hard, let's face it. But you get started writing, you're excited, the momentum's going, and you can write 20,000, 30,000 words that way without too much trouble. But then what? Then you're stuck. So if you haven't done some form of the blueprint, this would be a good time. Make sure your main character is working toward a goal, and make sure you're super clear on what you are trying to say to your reader about that goal and about why it's important. If you don't know your main character's arc of change, you'll have difficulty in the middle. If you don't know the argument that you're trying to make with this book, you're going to have difficulty in the middle. So figure that out, and then you create the circumstances that test her over and over in different ways. You ever notice, like in real life, we're confronted by lessons over and over again that we don't learn the first time around? Same thing is true for your protagonist. Make sure she's got plenty of escalating tasks to master. Look at your secondary characters. You might do a character sheet at this point for each character. You're looking for ways that they amplify your character's good points or your character's faults, ways that they're allies, ways that they're enemies. And all that will help you find conflict and tension, which is what you're trying to build your middle on. And then this will add to your character's arc of change. It'll show your character's arc of change, and you'll have a middle that is solid and working towards a specific ending. Carrie.
Yeah, there's the reason that, when you see there's all those classes out there and everywhere, the murky middle, the messy middle, all those kinds of fun things, those alliterative class names are there for a reason. So I would suggest taking a step back, because you're stuck, as you've said. And Terry had made reference in one of our recent videos about her favorite craft book, Save the Cat Writes a Novel. And I am also a big fan of that book. And I would suggest, as part of your step back, there you go, Stephanie's always got them at hand. Gotta love it. Creating a beat sheet and start to brainstorm. Use that to start to brainstorm some of the high level trends. So you the first catalog what you've already done, and then start to your way through. And I think some of the cues that are inherent in the beat sheet, like bad guys close in, or false victory, or false defeat, those can start to help you think about, like, well, what does that mean in terms of the story that I'm trying to tell? And that can trigger some inspiration. So think about those turning point scenes, right? And then when I started writing my book, the first thing I did, which is not the first thing I would do again, so I'm not recommending this, but the first thing I did was write 6 sort of critical scenes that ended up being a lot of my turning points. So in service of that, and in service of hopefully helping you move forward, I thought it might be helpful to just give you a brief outline of what those were. And you could use these as writing prompts to just sort of trigger some idea generation, some scene generation that you could then build off of to find your way through this messy, murky middle and through to the end. So the first one is the inciting incident. You probably already have this since you have the beginning of your book. But when we were talking about this earlier, Terry made an excellent point that every scene really has its own little mini inciting incident, right? So you could think about it in that way. What are a series of incidents, inciting incidents that your character is going to have to work their way through? Write a scene where a character acts as a foil or a mirror to your protagonist. In other words, they do something that your protagonist would never do, no matter how much he or she or they want to do. Or they're doing the exact same thing, but how you're working out, how does that manifest itself differently? What are the differences between how your character would do it versus this other character? And that can start to trigger some ideas of how things could happen. Write the scene that represents the emotional center of your novel. Oddly, this may come right where you are, right at the center, page-wise. In this scene, your main character or another character, but primarily your protagonist, should get something that he, she, or they wants. And that is sort of, again, going back to the idea of turning points. Great, they've just achieved this thing or they've gotten what they want. What's next? How does it turn out in ways that they didn't expect? You know, what was it about it that they either are so happy that they've achieved or they got it and now they're thinking, well, this is not what I thought it was. This doesn't feel great. Why? You know, use that to start to generate the emotional arc of the second half of your book. Write a scene where the story gets away from the tight coil of the plot. And what I mean by that is let us see the outside world and see things from that larger perspective. So think of it as like if you're narrowed in camera-wise and POV-wise, blast it back out a little bit. Take a step back to that 50,000-foot view and just play around in the world for a little bit and see what that might generate. Write a scene where something from the outside world is introduced at a crucial point that changes the course of the plot. Like maybe it's something completely external and unstoppable, like a war or a natural disaster. Or maybe it's just a character who comes to shake things up, who isn't expected, who's going to set your protagonist into a tizzy. And finally, write a scene where the emotions of the characters, or rather, write a scene where their desires do not match their actions. So I tend to default to thinking of this as a scene in dialogue where characters are talking to each other but not really saying what they mean, or there's a lot going on behind the scenes that is not being said. But it doesn't have to be that framework. You could do this in any number of ways, but it could just start you thinking on different trajectories for your character, different ways that you might not have thought through how they are reacting to things. And that could then stir up like, oh, all of a sudden now I know where I want them to end up emotionally. Bing. There you go. You've got an end point of sorts, and you've got your start, your murky middle. Now you just got to work your way through there and figure out the things that have to happen to get them to that point. So just a few ideas, play around with them, do some free writing, take a deep breath and have a little bit of fun with it. And I guarantee you will find your way through. So Stephanie, what do you think?
Yeah, well, I was just thinking, I love all of those prompts. And, even if something comes up within one of those prompts that doesn't end up making it into the book, it's at least rejuvenated some of that excitement and energy, that Terry was talking about often gets lost as you approach the middle. I mean, I'm in that place right now. I'm not stuck. I know where my story needs to go, but my energy is completely not in it. And it's just because it's the middle, it's hard, And so I think I like those scenes because A, they could really give you some ideas of where to go next, and B, they could rejuvenate that energy a little bit. So that's really cool. The only thing that I really want to add, because I was going to talk about the emotional growth of the character, which I will just reemphasize that it's very important to know what that is, but both of you have already talked about that a bit and given some strategies for that. So definitely think about that. That'll help you know where they need to be in each scene. And so what container can you create in order to have them subtly shift in their emotional state. The other piece is thinking about cause and effect. So from each scene, you need to be able to say, okay, because that happened, this next thing happened. So when you're stuck and you really don't know which scene needs to come next, go to the scene you just wrote and ask, okay, because that just happened, what logically makes sense would happen next? Whether it's the character's mood, what's the character's mood going to be in the next scene, and how is that going to impact the circumstances? Or because, so they just had two characters just had a giant fight. So what's the logical next thing that would happen with them, knowing their personalities? So asking that, or putting because of that between each of your scenes, is a really great way to make sure that they're connected. And I also just wanted to say really quickly, logistically, that Terry mentioned blueprint exercises earlier, and we've talked about it before at length, but she's referring to the blueprint for a book by our mentor, Jenny Nash. That's it from me.
I was waiting for that. Yeah. Good job with the books.
Yeah.
Well, good. Yeah, good job. Good luck getting out of your mired middle. And that's it for today. So we hope you found an answer that made sense to you at this point in your life, at this point in your book. Remember, you can submit your question anytime at dearbookcoach.com and subscribe to our weekly email. Each month, we randomly choose a subscriber who wins a call with a coach of their choice. We'll see you next time.